Hey guys, Julian here, and today I'm going to be talking to you about how to make modern rave techno stabs and drum breaks. As usual, you can get the full project file and samples and MIDI and presets. Everything from this video that you just heard in the intro is available right at the top of the description, and if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there because it's already available. And yeah, here we go. So, we're at 130 BPM. The first group sound thing that we have here is the breakbeat, which sounds like this. So as you can hear, this is pretty crunchy. You know, we've got saturation on like almost every single step of this, and we've got 3 layers here. So we have like an actual breakbeat, a hi-hat, and then a clap. And so this is the first thing with making these more modern style of breakbeats, is that you can't just use the breakbeat alone, because if I turn off the hi-hat and clap, listen to how this mix sounds. You know, it's not really got that same fullness to it as this does. You know, I feel like these two elements really add a lot in terms of just making sure that the break sounds really full, and also just kind of adds a lot of rhythm and sort of like intensity to it. Because, you know, if you just have this breakbeat, like let's say we have just the breakbeat and the kick, that sounds cool, but it's a bit dark. But then when we add these in, we're getting this in the high end, and then this clap confirming the 2 and 4. And the other thing that's happening too is that you can notice the break is chopped like this. So it goes. So then the clap. You know, it's just adding to that. And then also, like, this hi-hat, like I said, you know, this is really just adding a lot of high end. Because there's not really a lot of high end in just the break. But yeah, and then in terms of processing on all of these, on the break, I've got a bit of saturation. We've got a high-pass filter on that as well, just cutting out some low. And then I have an EQ, which is just there to boost the highs a little. With the hi-hat, it's just a little bit of drum bus and a high-pass, you know, to make it a bit harder hitting. And then to bring out that low end, or cut out the low end. You can see I shortened it with the amp envelope a little as well. And then on the clap, we just have an overdrive. But you can, when I turn that off and then back on, it's just making it hit a bit harder and making that clap a bit stronger. And yeah, so that's really the breakdown for the breakbeats here. Like, I would always try to start with the breakbeat, then add the hi-hat and the clap, and, you know, try to just get them very fluid and together like this. Like, the other thing to keep in mind, and the last thing pretty much that I'll say about this, is just that none of these is fighting for the same space. You know, the clap is doing one very clear thing, the hi-hat's doing one very clear thing, and the breakbeat's doing one very clear thing. So then when you play them together, even with other elements, you can still hear each individual element versus, you know, sometimes I see people try to layer together like 2 breakbeats or, you know, have like a whole drum loop over top of the breakbeat. You can't do that, but if you can accentuate the breakbeat with some nice hits like a hi-hat and a clap, that's really the way to go. And then on the group of all of those, I just have a bit of saturation and an EQ. So here's without this. And then with it, so you can hear these things just give it that last bit of like fullness and kind of bring out, you know, the fatness in the breakbeat. And then the EQ is just boosting the highs a bit. And yeah, and then after that we have the stab, which sounds like this. And so this one is a little bit more simple because, to be honest, you know, the main thing here is just getting the stab, like getting an audio sample of one of these old school stabs. And there's a ton of places you can get them from. You know, there's like Rave Generator, VST. You can just find banks of these online. You can sample them from old tracks. You know, there's a lot of places you can get them from. But once you get the stab in here, there's a few things to keep in mind. So the first thing is the articulation of the notes. As you can see, you know, not every note is the same length here. We have like it goes like kind of like a held out note on the second one. You know, doing stuff like that right off the bat goes a long way in terms of making it sound more modern and just more interesting too, because now there's just kind of more dynamic range in the sound. And it's not that hard. You can just play around with the length of some of the notes. Like, maybe we can make this one a bit longer too. You know, just doing stuff like that just to kind of like play with the articulation of the notes and really bring it to life in terms of not just adding effects and stuff, but really just like the way that you play it in. For the effects on this one, so there's a few main things. So the first thing is just going to be to add a little bit of reverb. You know, it goes a long way. Because it kind of gives it some space and makes it fit into the track a bit more. Versus if you just had it completely dry. After that, I have this width rack. So this is this rack that I made recently. I'm going to be making a video on it soon. But what this is it just spreads the sound out. And this really helps with these. I'll show you. Here's without this. And then with it. So you hear how much more lively it is when we add this? It's not even just about like making it super wide. It's just like when you do add that width to it, it makes it sound so much bigger and more full, and it really goes a long way. Like, I'll show you. Here's what this sounds like in the mix without the width rack. And then with it. And this is one of those things for making it sound more modern too, because like back in the day, I don't think they were really doing that much to try to spread their stabs out and make them sound super wide. But if you do something like this, again, without it and with it, it's like night and day. After that, we have the drum bus. So this is probably the last like main thing in terms of just making this sound more full and bigger in your track, and thus more modern. You know, adding some kind of saturation or any kind of plugin like this that makes it sound fatter and more full goes a long way. I'll show you. Here's without the drum bus. It's like, you know, it's not quite there. It's a bit thin. The sound is there, but it's small. But then when we add the drum bus, you know, it's super full. It sounds huge. It hits really nicely too. And yeah, so any kind of saturation or anything like this is going to go a long way in terms of making this just sound really full and really modern. And then the final thing on there is a high pass filter just to cut out the low end a bit, you know. That's another thing, honestly, as well. Like, you know, if you do stuff like that, it's going to go a long way in terms of making the track sound a lot cleaner. And ultimately, you know, it's just going to make everything sound a bit bigger and cleaner. And then the last layer we have in here is this kick, which sounds like this. So this is just your standard rumble kick. You can see we got this fat, like 909 style kick. Then I've got the audio effect rack here. We've got a dry chain with a little bit of saturation. This is the punch. And then here's the rumble. So this is just reverb going into a distortion, which you can hear creates that like deep low end, and then we just low pass it. And then it's just being sidechained to the kick, and then I've got an EQ8 cutting at 100 Hz and boosting the lows. And then finally after that, we just have a bit of drum bus. So with the kick, you know, this is pretty simple. It's just kind of like your standard sort of big, ravey techno kick. The one thing I will say though here, how this relates to the rest of the drums, is sort of like that stop and start feel. Because what's happening here is you're basically getting boom. So what's happening is you have this really fat low sound, and then it's just like a ton of highs. And this is really good for getting that more modern sound as well, because I think back in the day, it was more just like, you know, they would just have the breakbeat playing through like this the whole time, but this feels a lot more like kind of controlled and interesting to me this way. So definitely just keeping that in mind, the sort of stop and start aesthetic with the kick and then the breaks is going to make a big difference in terms of just making your tracks exciting, and it's a cool way to play around with the dynamics in this style of track. So yeah, that's me for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe, and let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Like I said in the beginning, you can get the full project file and samples and MIDI and presets Everything from this video is available right at the top of the description, and if you're a patron, my Patreon, check there. It's already available. Thank you so much, guys, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.